meeting is being broadcast live on the city's website. The meeting will be held in a conference call format with all commissioners calling in from remote locations. Slides will be shown on the live broadcast as they are discussed. Ms. Chow, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Chairman Roessler?
Here.
Vice Chair Kramer?
Here.
Commissioner Hastings? Commissioner Grimm?
Here.
Commissioner Garrettson?
Here.
Commissioner Looney?
Here.
Commissioner Aguilera?
Here.
Student Commissioner Natale? And Student Commissioner Wolf. Let the record show that Commissioner Hastings is absent at this time, and so are the Student Commissioners Natale and Wolf. Thank you very much.
Very good. Commissioners, we need to go back and adopt the minutes from our April 21st meeting, since none of that was done online. So if you would identify yourself, and I'll call on you, and then we can have a motion and a second.
Commissioner Grimm.
Kramer?
Commissioner Grimm.
I move approval of the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Commissioner
Kramer?
Garrettson?
Commissioner Garrettson.
I second that.
All right, Commissioners, it has been moved and second to approve the minutes of the April 21st meeting. Ms. Chow, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Chairman Roessler?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kramer?
Yes.
Commissioner Hastings? Commissioner Grimm?
Yes.
Commissioner Garrettson?
Yes.
Commissioner Looney?
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilera?
Yes.
So motion passes 6-0 with Commissioner Hastings absent. Thank you.
Very good. All right, thank you. We will now move on to our public hearing. Before we get started, I neglected last time to disclose that back in 1987, when I was working in the private sector, I represented the property owner at that time in the processing of a specific plan for the property. Since that time, I have had no contact or input on the property except for the church that we approved a couple of years ago, and have no financial contact with the previous planning firm that I worked for. So, any other disclosures?
Yes, Commissioner Grimm. The applicant's representative did call me the other day. Phone call lasted about 3 minutes. They asked if I had any questions, and I said no.
Very good.
Chairman Roessler? I'm sorry, this is Patsy Chow again. There are a couple of items on the agenda as far as agenda changes and oral communications. If we can cover those two items, please, before we enter the public hearing.
You were right. We approved the minutes. The next item on the agenda was agenda changes. Any changes to the agenda tonight, Ms. Chow?
No agenda changes tonight. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. And then oral communications. This is time that the Commission sets aside for comments from the public on items that are not on the agenda. And do we have any oral communications, Ms. Chow?
We have received no oral communications prior to 6 p.m. For the meeting tonight. Thank you, Chairman Roessler.
Okay. All right, so I'll go over our public hearing format, and then we will turn it over to Mr. Conley for the staff presentation. First, staff will give a presentation on the project, which may be followed by a presentation prepared by the applicant. Following the presentations, the planning commissioners will have an opportunity to ask staff or the applicant questions for clarification. Following the commission's questions, the public hearing will be open, and 10 minutes will be provided for the public to email or call in with additional comments. The commission will take a break during this time. At the completion of the break period, the chairman will ask staff to provide a summary of the comments received during the break, and those requesting to be read into the record will be read. The commission may request staff to provide a response or additional information based on the comments received. I will then close the public hearing, and once the public hearing has been concluded, we will open it up for commission discussion and ultimately a vote. Any other comments, Ms. Chow, Mr. Connolly, that need to be made before we start into the presentation?
None from me. Thank you, Chairman.
None from me either. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. All right, Mr. Connolly, your staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. This is a special use permit for the Tri-City Islamic Center located at 2136 Industrial Court. For the public, we're on slide number 4, which is the starting slide of my presentation. Moving to the next slide, number 5, the project location is at 2136 Industrial Court. It's located in the eastern side of the commercial center. It's definitely located south of the 78, west of Sycamore Avenue, and north of Thibodeau Road. The overall center is 11 different buildings. It's a 0.41 acre site. The existing project site is located with the orange box around it on the slide. It consists of an 11,135 square foot commercial building, and it is on a separate parcel from the rest of the buildings within the center. There is reciprocal parking over the entire commercial center with a total of 386 parking spaces for the center itself, which serves all of the uses within the industrial center. We're going to move to slide 6. The existing general plan designation on the left is commercial services. This is the most intensive commercial designation within the general plan. The zoning on the right is C3. The C3 zone corresponds to the commercial services general plan designation for the site. We can move to slide number 7. Some history on the site. The center was developed in 1979 with a site development plan, and a reciprocal parking easement over the overall center was established at that time. The zoning administrator approved a minor use permit in 1990 for a prior religious assembly use, which occupied the site until approximately 2015 when the use was vacated. The improvements in the property for the assembly that are in the space were established at that time in 1990. The Tri-City Islamic Center was granted a minor use permit in 2019 for religious assembly, which is in the existing space. We're going to go and move to slide 8. In the C1 zone, a church, club, or lodge is permitted with a minor use permit under the following circumstances. There are a maximum of 100 members. The use is located within an existing building, and adequate parking is available. Any assembly use that cannot meet all of these requirements triggers a special use permit. Tri-City Islamic Center's current minor use permit allows up to 100 members on site on Fridays between noon and 2 p.m. and up to 20 people for administrative activities all other times of operation. The Code Enforcement Division has received complaints primarily related to parking associated with Tri-City's use, and it was investigated, and the records are included in the staff report. Complaints have also been received involving exceedance of the occupancy limits that are in the minor use permit for Tri-City Islamic Center, which were further investigated by Code Enforcement and referred to the planning staff. City staff addressed the prior occupancy issues in a letter dated March 2nd of this year, which was sent to TCIC and is included in the record. which requires that they either comply with the terms of their prior minor use permit in terms of their assembly and operations, or request an amendment or a special use permit. We're going to move to slide 9. TCIC subsequently submitted their request for a special use permit, which is the subject of our hearing this evening. The request is for an expansion of their religious assembly use and to modify their parking requirements. They'll continue to occupy the existing 11,135 square foot commercial building on the site, and they're requesting a maximum occupancy of 100 attendees. We can move to slide 10. This is the table that Tri-City Islamic Center submitted that's in the staff report and the project description. This includes a description of the maximum occupancies, the services, and the times of use that are the basis for the SUP request. The highest occupancies requested would occur on Fridays from noon to 2 and 5 to 10 p.m., on Saturdays from 8:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. and 5 to 10 p.m., and on Sundays from 6 to 10 p.m. These are all the periods where a maximum of 100 attendees is requested. There are also 5 daily prayers that are noted between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. every day of the week for up to 50 people, but these are not scheduled activities. According to the applicant, they're prayer times that individual members may attend the facility. Special consideration is further requested during Ramadan, the holy month, to allow up to 100 members for services between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. for the 30-day period. And I'm sure the applicant will address this, but considering the current restrictions, this year's Ramadan will not be able to be observed on the site. We're going to move to slide 11. The site plan submitted by Tri-City Islamic Center is included in the Planning Commission's packet. This depicts the access points, layout, and parking on the site. This is just provided for public reference. Moving to slide 12. This shows the floor plan layout from the tenant improvements that were installed with the prior religious assembly use on the site in 1990. No occupancy changes are proposed with respect to Tri-City Islamic Center's request, and so no building improvements are triggered. The review for fire sprinklers occurs at the time of a change in occupancy, and because there's no change in occupancy from the prior religious assembly use, fire sprinklers aren't triggered. Move to slide 13. The general plan designation is commercial services on the site, as noted before, allows heavier commercial and light industrial uses, inclusive of all permitted and special uses in the C2 and C3 zones. Tri-City Islamic Center's proposed use is compatible in terms of use characteristics and hours of operation with other commercial retail, commercial service, and religious assembly uses within the commercial and industrial center. Moving to slide 14. The project's consistency with zoning. The subject property is Zone C3, which allows a religious assembly use with a minor use permit or a special use permit, as previously discussed. The special use permit requires specific findings which are included in draft form in the staff report. The Planning Commission can agree with the staff's recommended findings. They may request revisions to the findings based on discussions or determinations at this hearing, or they may disagree and request staff bring back revised findings with specific direction from the Commission. The modified parking requirements requested by Tri-City Islamic Center are permitted under the special use permit upon approval by the Commission. Staff's recommendation is based on the findings of the parking study submitted by the applicant and included in the staff report, and the parking management plan submitted by the applicant, which was revised and placed online as an add to packet this morning. Conditions of approval recommended by staff address hours and occupancies for Tri-City Islamic Center's use, their use of the building, their maintenance of the reciprocal parking easement, and their parking management plan requirements. Moving to slide number 15. The parking study prepared for the project is included in the staff report, prepared by Rick Engineering. It's included as exhibit number 7. The parking study was initially prepared for a request for up to 250 attendees, but the applicant's request was revised to the current 100-member maximum occupancy following consultation with staff. The study counted parking spaces within the overall center during different periods for 7 days in September of 2019. During that period, the lowest parking count documented was on a Monday afternoon at approximately 21%, or 82 spaces within the center. The highest count was on a Friday afternoon at 45%, or approximately 175 spaces within the center. This was all during active operation of the mosque under its current MUP. The parking study found that adequate parking is available on site to serve the proposed use, but the parking location is still a concern based on a lot of the correspondence that we've received. This triggered staff and TCIC to prepare a parking management plan, which has been submitted by the applicant to address the location and management of on-site parking associated with their expansion, and this is included as an attachment to the report as well. Also noted that there were some revisions to the PMP that were submitted and distributed to the Commission this morning and added to the website. It should also be noted that there is no parking management plan currently in effect on the site for their existing minor use permit. The proposed parking management plan identifies locations for recommended parking and operational conditions for managing the parking. The PMP will be reviewed in detail as part of the applicant's presentation following staff's presentation. The parking management plan is the applicant's best effort to accommodate their parking needs while minimizing impacts to the surrounding businesses. It's important that the Commission understand that they may adjust the parking management plan as desired in an effort to try to address this issue. Policies in the parking management plan include encouraging carpooling, requiring on-site security to manage the parking, and online communication for membership regarding the availability and preference for parking during service. The next slide, slide 17, was a map that I was going to refer to, but because the applicant has a more detailed presentation, I'm going to defer to them for the parking management plan details. Slide number 18. The staff's recommendation is in favor of granting the special use permit for religious assembly use at 2136 Industrial Court with the specified conditions of approval. The applicant's presentation follows. If I could ask the Commission to hold questions until the end of the applicant's presentation, they may address some of your questions initially. Move to slide 19. Terry Matthew and Matt Simmons with Consultants Collaborative are representing the applicant, and Abdullah Tahiri is representing Tri-City Islamic Center as the applicant as well, and they're on the line. And if it's okay with the chairman, I'm going to hand it over to Terry to cover the slides for the applicant.
Go ahead, Ms.
Good
Matt.
evening. Yes, good evening, Planning Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I just want to thank you for taking this time and for continuing to meet virtually during COVID-19. As John indicated, my name is Terry Matthew. I'm a project planner with Consultants Collaborative, and I'm here on the line with Jim Simmons. Matt Simmons has stepped out, and Matt Simmons is back. And we're happy to answer any questions you may have at the end of this presentation. So I'd like to introduce you to Tri-City Islamic Center. That's on slide number 21. And Tri-City Islamic Center evolved as a result of combining several smaller North County mosques into one synergistic mosque. And the current location at 2136 Industrial Court was selected to become the central hub for services, community meetings, and activities. Going to the next slide. John had the same Tri-City schedule in his presentation and noted that there were 5 times for regular prayer throughout the day, and there's a few people that come during that day. And then Friday during midday is their main prayer service, which was part of the original MUP. And then Friday night is family night. Saturday school is for those who are interested in Islam and the younger ones. And then Saturday and Sunday evenings, they may have a lecture series or a community event. And then also they observe Ramadan, which is an annual event. It's a 30-day celebration. And they will meet from 7 to 11 p.m. For 30 days during this observation. Now, I wanted to just mention that the original plan, and under which they applied for the SUP, was to hold 2 large Ramadan services on site, which with up to 250 people. But after talking with and thinking it through, that has been changed now to only 100 people. So going on to the next slide, which is slide 23. Again, this is the center, and I'll explain this. The center has 11 buildings ranging in square footage from 11,000 to 16,000 square feet and 386 parking spaces. And the various uses in the center are detailed by retail, office, restaurant, brewery, churches, service, and a gym. And at the request of the city, Rick Engineering was retained, and that Rick Engineering is a well-known and respected transportation and traffic engineering firm. And they were asked to evaluate the on-site parking. And Rick Engineering conducted a parking study during the week of September 8th through 14th, taking hourly counts from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And this was done in order to provide the most thorough representation of the parking at the center. And as you can see on this slide, what Rick Engineering did was they divided the property into 6 various zones just for the ease of counting, and it's become sort of how we refer to this. So if I can walk you through, up in the very northwest corner in sort of aqua is Zone 1. The next zone is in red, Zone 2, green, Zone 3, blue or purple, Zone 4, which is Tri-Cities location is in the middle of that zone. And then in Zone 5 is in yellow. And finally, at the bottom of the slide is Zone 6, and that's where the gym is located. I also want to mention that the CCNRs were amended in 2001, and to affirm and detail the language more clearly of the reciprocal parking throughout the center, as some zones have more parking than others. And going on to slide 24, the reason I included this slide, I think it's attributable to why Tri-Cities use is compatible in the center. You have both daytime users, and then you have users that have weekend and evening services. So those users highlighted in green are typically open during normal business hours. And other users, such as the 2 other religious assembly users, the gym, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, may have hours after normal business hours, and as does Tri-City. Tri-City's only time of daytime use would be 2 hours on a Friday. And again, this is why, given the parking, it can work very well, because some businesses are actually closed when other users are in operation. And also, I think John did highlight this, the Tri-City Rick Engineering provided a slide in their parking study that showed the average occupancy throughout the week. Obviously, on Sunday mornings, when the religious users are not full operation, 44% of the parking was used. And the same was true on Friday, but then throughout the week, it ran from 21 to 37%. To further detail this, I included another page from the parking study, which shows the overall parking availability. And what I wanted to highlight was the fact that the parking study indicated that during normal business hours during the week, there were over 300 spaces available. But then on Sunday mornings, when the 2 other religious assembly users were in operation, it drops to 217 spaces, which would be expected. Now, during the evening hours, it drops down to 240, 253 as other evening users come into occupancy. And if you look at specifically at Friday, during Tri-Cities use, you'll note that the occupancy availability of parking was 211 spaces. What's really interesting about that particular number is that on that specific day, one of the other religious assembly users was hosting a memorial service. So that had a bigger impact on the parking. But I want to clarify that Tri-City does not hold memorial services and or weddings or any kind of special events like that. It's just not part of their tradition. And then as I stated previously, Tri-City's original SUP application was for 250 attendees to accommodate their two key Ramadan celebrations. And we had anticipated that there might be an impact on the parking, and we wanted to discuss it with the other owners and see if there was a way we could determine to manage the parking in conjunction with the other owners. So we held or attended 2 HOA meetings to discuss this with other owners. And the owners expressed concern over the large number of attendees. Understandable. So in response, Tri-City has taken their SUP application down from 250 to 100. In addition, they have taken their two largest Ramadan celebrations off-site. Now, they haven't met or not meeting this year because of COVID-19, but they would have done that no matter what. So moving on to slide 27, this is the parking management plan. We were asked to create this, and Tri-City has agreed to it. And the key elements of it are that Tri-City will park along the fence line so as not to infringe on other owners, parking at their front door, that kind of thing. So we looked at it, and basically developed that they would park along the fence line in their own zone, and then they would move and park in zone 5, which is the yellow zone, for 29 spaces, 26 spaces in zone 4. They might have to move up into zone 3 slightly with 12 spaces. And then if those were all taken and they had to expand their parking, they would go way up to the very far north in the aqua section. And there's 33 spaces up there which are rarely used. And so in combination, that would provide more than adequate parking. In addition, they would encourage their members to carpool, and they use an application called a WhatsApp and they would communicate with their members for parking directions in terms of where the parking is available. And again, finally, they would notify the HOA and other owners of the annual Ramadan dates so that they could tell them that during this period of time, there will be some additional parking in the evening in the hopes that they can be aware and resolve that. Now, how would they implement this parking management plan? Let me just take a moment and they would implement the parking management plan by they already have one security guard. They would add a second security guard to help direct their members. They have developed a parking committee task force with trained volunteers to guide members to the specific areas. And they will post a sign in the lobby to continually communicate with their members where the best parking for them is along the fence line. Again, they would use the WhatsApp to also send a message prior to meetings. And then finally, again, they would notify the HOA owners. So in summary, I want to indicate and remind you that the CC&Rs provide shared parking across the entire site. That by the parking study, there is more than sufficient parking available throughout the week. And that Tri-City has greatly exceeded reasonable efforts to respond to questions and concerns raised by the other owners, and as well as the city in terms of the code violations. There was some misunderstanding with the city over the MUP and how it was to be used. And that went on for a period of time. But once they were clear on what the MUP limitations were, they immediately addressed it. And if you look at the later code violation notices, they were totally in compliance with their MUP. And they have worked very diligently to be a good neighbor in this center and to address any concerns that have come up. And they will continue to do that. So that is my presentation, but there is one video that I would like to have ask Patsy to now play that shows the drone video of the parking on a Friday in the center. And I think it will give you a much more realistic picture of what's really going on. The drone video
Terry.
Was taken February 21st,
Terry.
2020. Yes.
Terry, this is Patsy. I'm sorry. I was playing the video, and for some reason, it kicked me out of the presentation. So just bear with me for a second so I get to that slide. And when I play the video, I'll go ahead and give you the cue so you can start talking about what's in the video.
Okay, great.
Hold on for just 1 second, please. Okay, we're going to try this again, and I'm going to hit play, and let's see. Go ahead. Start. You can do your description. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Patsy. This is a real-time video, and...
It's playing.
Okay, and basically it was, again, taken February 21st, 2020 at 12:58 p.m., which is during Tri-City's main prayer service time. The video actually starts down in Zone 6, and it proceeds northwest all the way up to Zone 1. And as you will see, as you watch the video, basically they've asked the members to park along the fence line, and they've all been reasonably compliant in that. And you will notice the parking pretty empty on this particular Friday. And that pretty much holds true. I mean, there are evenings when it gets more crowded, but this is a real-time video of what's going on at the center. So I'd like to thank you for your time and request your approval of Tri-City's SUP application. And again, we are on the conference line for any questions. And then, Patsy, I believe we also have, when the video finishes, we have Abdullah Tahiri, who's a lead member of the board for Tri-City, that would like to also address the commissioners.
Yep. So we're back to Chairman Roessler. So the next, Mr. Abdullah can actually come online and do his presentation. I'll just leave the video on the screen right now the way it is. It's at standstill at this point. It's paused.
We'll call on. Go ahead, Mr. Tahir.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I really appreciate it. As Terry mentioned, my name is Abdullah Tahiri. I'm one of the board members here at Tri-City Islamic Center. I just want to take a minute, and on behalf of our entire board and our entire community members, I would like to extend our sincere thanks to the City of Vista's professional staff, as well as all of you, the commissioners, for giving us this opportunity in these really unprecedented times to consider our special use permit. For the sake of respecting your time, we decided not to inundate you really with too many videos and letters from our community members and our interfaith partners. However, rest assured that they really stand in solidarity with us as we make a reasonable case for our permit. And I mentioned reasonable case because for the 100 people, honestly, we need 35 spots. So as Terry mentioned and John alluded, there's ample parking. As you may know, TCIC was established February of last year. Our mission is really to be a conduit for providing social good in our community. And we really want to add to the reputation of our beautiful city that it's a great place to work, live, and worship. Since last year, we're very proud of some of our contributions that we have made to our city, and I think they're worth mentioning here. We have a strong relationship with our neighboring churches and synagogues to enhance interfaith understanding. We did a collaborative effort with Hands of Peace. Hands of Peace is a nationally renowned organization. They're committed to empowering young Israelis, Palestinians, and Americans to raise their voices as leaders of change. We hosted a meeting facilitated by the Department of Homeland Security to provide resources to all houses of worship in the light of the attack that happened in the Poway Synagogue in April of last year. We donated 500 face masks recently to Tri-City Hospital. Our concerns for our law enforcement, and we donated 250 masks to the local sheriff department in coordination with Captain Sheriff Justin White as well as Deputy Jack Reynolds. And then we also made outreach to the city of Vista to donate 150 surgical masks for emergency workers. We are also committed to really being good neighbors, as Carrie alluded, in our business, and so we're really looking forward to coexisting professionally and amicably. We're fully dedicated to keeping the lines of communication open with all our neighbors so we can deal with any issues, major or minor, in a respectful and constructive manner. We're also optimistic that our neighbors share same sentiments to making positive contributions to our city as TCIC does. The existence of a socially responsible organization like TCIC is truly important to our city, and we thank you for accommodating our permits so we can operate to serve everyone in City of Vista. Thank you for your time, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Mr. Tahiri. We will now move on to questions from the commissioners. Commissioner Kramer, any questions of staff or the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do. If you could refer to slide 10, please. So my question is, I see that from education, lecture, series, special events, maximum number of attendees, 100, and that's on, there's Sunday and Saturday from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Just underneath that, I see administrative activities with the maximum number of attendees, 20, and the times overlap. So are we talking a maximum of 120, or is it 100 and it doesn't matter what the combination is?
Commissioner, this is John Conley. The answer to that question is it's 100 limit regardless of the combination.
Thank you, Mr. Conley. Second question is regarding all of the violations and code compliance. Other than the parking issues, which may be addressed in the parking management plan, my question is, what has changed with the management that's not going to have those same violations occur again?
So, Commissioner, this is John Conley again. The prior violations were primarily associated with the 100-person limit occupancy during Fridays from noon to 2, and all other times it was limited to 20 people. And we received a number of complaints that they were exceeding the 20-person limit, and some complaints that they had exceeded the 100-person limit, although I don't think we confirmed that. But we did confirm that they had exceeded the 20 during hours outside the Friday from noon to 2, and we addressed that in the letter that's included in the record to notify them that they needed to restrict those activities or amend their use permit. The primary difference now is that they're applying to amend the permit to address their change in activities or their proposed change, and they've included the parking study and the parking management plan to address the parking concerns associated with their increased activities.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Conley. I have no other questions.
Very good. Is Commissioner Hastings with us?
Yes, I am. No, I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Ford?
Yes, I apologize. I had a home emergency and I couldn't dial in till about 6:10. I'm still stuck. I guess it's a question for the applicant. It's how can we be sure that 100 number isn't exceeded? I don't think you're going to stand there with the little clicker thing when people go in, but it seems difficult to control in some of the situations that we're talking about where there's services.
Yes, hi, this is Terry Matthew, and I think what Tri-City has actually done is they are actually taking account because there is a concern, and so they've tried to address that. And there's a couple of stories that have been told about even some of their board members arriving, say, late for a prayer service, and there were already, they had reached their 100-person capacity and were actually turned away. So what they do is they have somebody at the entry door in the lobby that actually is noting how many people and turning people away if, in fact, they have to for their main prayer service or any of the events that they're applying for.
Okay, thank you.
So it's self-control.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Hastings, this is also Abdullah from Tri-City. I just want to expand on this. This is a great question. Typically, Friday prayer is the most important one, but what we have done is, in order to make sure we do a better job of the crowd control, we have broken, so we do 2 sessions. We have the first session that is, as Terry mentioned, it's monitored, making sure people are not exceeding the limit. And then once the first group leaves, the second session starts, so we make sure that we are within the compliance of the 100, Commissioner Hastings.
Okay, thank you for that information. That's all my questions.
Very good. Commissioner Grimm, any questions of staff or the applicant?
Yeah, I actually had a question for Mr. Connolly. I think it was condition 5B or 53. I can't read my own writing, but regarding the reciprocal parking condition that was changed, I was just wondering why the need for the change and what staff's thought was in okaying that particular change.
Commissioner Grimm, this is John Conley. The change to the reciprocal parking easement condition was based on a request from the applicant, and it was largely a result of the concerns that they have with the existing ownership changing the association rules and CC&Rs, which could affect the reciprocal parking easement, and then in effect could affect the viability of their special use permit. So the previous condition said something to the effect of if the reciprocal parking easement goes away, the SUP is nullified, and they requested that we change the language to say something to the effect of if it goes away, we have to revisit the use permit to confirm that there's adequate parking available.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Commissioner Garrettson, any questions on staff?
Yes. Yes, I do. I think the first question is for Mr. Conley, and that is there anything in this that would require the other tenants to give up parking? In other words, do they retain all of their rights under the approval of moving in?
So there is a reciprocal parking easement across the property that's shared by all the ownership, so there's no, quote, assigned parking to anyone, including the Islamic Center. So they can't mark spaces for themselves, just like other owners in the center currently can't mark spaces for their own use. So that wouldn't necessarily apply. What we've tried to do is identify a plan that they can pursue to direct their patrons to park in areas that wouldn't conflict with the surrounding businesses, but they're not necessarily taking parking away from those businesses since it's all shared within the center.
So there's nothing in this SUP that should interfere with the other tenants conducting normal business?
They may disagree with that, but in staff's opinion, the parking management plan addresses to the reasonable extent the ability for them to park away from other businesses so that they don't impact their customer base. That's our intent. There are other users within the center that have established by right or could establish by right that could have intensive parking impacts as well beyond what is on their parcel. And I believe there are some of those as well on the site. It's really more a question of what times are those users on the site and how are they managing their parking?
It seems to be that a lot of correspondents have expressed dissatisfaction with the relationship and the cooperation from Tri-City. I wonder if the representative from Tri-City could address that and why they've been able to not work with the other tenants and why we should be reassured that that wouldn't be a continuous problem.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. This is Abdullah. Thank you for your question. Of course, as Terry alluded, we made two goodwill gestures and had two meetings with our neighbors. And we wanted to make sure that we listened to their concern. One of the concerns from one of our neighbors was that parking was an issue, so we immediately tried to rectify that, and we hired a second security guard to make sure that we address that concern. And of course, as we have worked with our neighbors, we're very pleased to also reach out to the churches that are in the center, and they also, one of the things that we wanted to do, as Terry mentioned, Sunday is a very packed day, and then we were very mindful of that. So when we had our Sunday school, we intentionally changed our Sunday school to Saturday school to make sure that we do not impact the businesses, the churches that are there. And it's worth highlighting that in the span of 7 days or in the span of 1 week, our core usage is only for 2.5 hours on Friday. And the span of a 12 months, our core usage is during the month of Ramadan, which those services are after hours and majority of the businesses are closed. So the impact on the parking is minimal with all the parking that's available. But as I alluded in my comment, we are always having an open door, listening to concerns, taking actions to make sure that we can live very amicably and professionally with our neighbors, and we really hope and wish that they will extend the same courtesy to us as well.
The parking study, was that done with every space occupied? I mean, did we have a couple of businesses that were closed when the parking occupancy study was done, like the brewery and the gym?
Actually, no. All businesses were in operation and that was what was so great about it being done in September, because obviously we're not in COVID time, but all businesses were in operation at that time, and that's why we did it from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. to capture both the daytime and the evening users.
And finally, for this round of questions, what would prevent future expansion creating more parking problems other than they would have to go through a special use permit? I mean, is there any plan for future expansion?
Not at this time.
So from the staff side of things, Commissioner, we're solely evaluating their 100-member request tonight. They have not indicated at this point that they intend to pursue a higher number, and if they did any expansion of their membership beyond what's conditioned tonight, it would have to come back to the Commission.
Oh, one other question. When Ramadan is fully in operation, is there any business that would conflict parking-wise with the Ramadan services?
Actually, yes. The two other religious assembly users do have meetings or services on Wednesday night, and that's probably the key night is midweek. But there are no other that we're aware, no other users in the center that would have operations as late as 7 to 11.
And there would be ample parking for those services as well as the Ramadan services?
Yes, there would be, and that's why we even highlighted and said we would go up to the far northwest corner where virtually there is not much parking, and we would park all the way up there so that we don't infringe on any of the other owners or businesses.
All right, thank you. That's all my questions at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner Gerritsen. Commissioner Lunny, any questions of staff for the applicant?
Yes, I have two questions for staff and two questions for the applicant. John, when did the parking issues become a problem?
The code enforcement activity that's in the staff report here, I got to look. I believe it was back around the summertime of last year that we had our first code enforcement issues. It was around July, if I'm not mistaken, and the initial use permit was issued in April.
Has there been any past parking concerns with the other churches on the properties?
Not aware of any code enforcement issues related to parking associated with the other churches. The primary concern that we received was that TCIC was operating at times when the other businesses were operating, which doesn't seem to be as much of a problem for the other religious assemblies in the center.
Okay.
John, can I address that question as well? Because I think there is some email correspondence that was sent to the city and to the commissioners that did address the fact that one of the other religious assembly users was holding memorial services and weddings during normal business hours, and their location is such that it did impact some parking in the center. And so I think that kind of use during the week has left somewhat of a, bad taste in the other owners' mouths. And so basically, that's why I mentioned that Tri-City does not hold those kind of events. And they have really agreed to comply with this SUP or their main MUP services. And we have actually met with one of the other churches, and we would like to work with them to manage some of their parking needs.
Okay, thank you. Terry, I have a couple questions for you, please.
Sure.
You had just mentioned that no weddings are held at that facility.
Correct.
Are there any type of receptions that are held there?
Actually, no. They have a Friday family night, so I don't know if they call that a reception. That's a family night, and they have a gathering of children and adults. But there are no wedding receptions. There are no. If a wedding couple wanted to come, they might come during a normal prayer service, but that would really be it.
The reason I asked that question is because video had been given to the city that showed what appeared to be a bride and groom and a wedding party.
And they were coming for prayer on a Friday evening, yes.
Okay.
During their what would be normal prayer times.
Okay.
And Mr. Commissioner, this is Abdullah from Tri-City. I just want to make it very clear that Tri-City will not be holding wedding receptions or any kind of funeral and caskets or anything that really causes parking issues. The video that you're alluding to is bride and groom. They're not doing their reception at the Tri-City Islamic Center. They're just coming for a regular prayer to basically be there. And, of course, when we are our permit is granted, we want to make sure that we're in full compliance of our permit details.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Terry, you had mentioned that currently Ramadan services are being held off campus. And I'm not saying this is a path that we will be taking, but would Tri-City be open to having Ramadan services held off campus on a permanent basis?
As a condition.
Say that.
I think the answer is that this is one of the reasons that they want to have the expanded SUP with 100 people. Now, as I did mention, they have two key Ramadan celebrations, which are typically on a Saturday, which would be their largest gatherings, up to 250. That's why they asked for the 250 originally. And they have elected as a group to take those two largest celebrations off-site. But the other prayer services that go on in the evenings during Ramadan, that they would like to hold those at this particular site, and we don't believe that their parking on those evenings will interfere with anyone else's use.
Okay, thank you, Terry. That's all the questions that I have.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Commissioner Aguilar, any questions of staff or the applicant?
Yeah, I have a couple. Commissioner Kramer asked most of the questions that I had. However, I was curious, and this might be for Mr. Tahiri, when was the last meeting you guys held there, or gathering, and how many people attended?
Mr. Aguilar, this would be, of course, prior to March 17 of this year. It may have been, of course, prior to the pandemic, basically impacting this entire state and the country. So may have been probably the first week of March on Friday for the Friday prayers, most likely.
Friday would have been your last gathering then?
Correct.
And how many people were there?
So it was a Friday prayer, would not have exceeded 100 people. And as I mentioned, for the 100 people that we are requesting, the impact on parking will be 35 to 40 spots max for those events.
Okay, that was my next question. How many vehicles, if you know? So 35 to 40 vehicles?
Yeah, for example, for my own family, so when I come in, we have a van, so we just bring one van. It's my wife, myself, and my 4 kids. So, a lot of community members are basically either carpooling or they're coming with a family for one vehicle and multiple individuals, so the impact on the parking is minimal.
Great. So with the HOA or the other owners in the center, have you discussed, I know someone mentioned it earlier here, is there a way of marking spaces that to communicate to not only your members but others that there is some sort of a parking management program in place, and mostly to direct your members that these are the spaces dedicated that we would like for you to occupy first, at least, before we spill over to other spaces? Has that been discussed?
Yeah, Commissioner, this is Terry Matthew. Actually, because of the shared and reciprocal parking nature and the easement on the property, there is a restriction with parking spaces being specifically designated for.
I understand that. I'm not saying they're going to be designated specifically for the church, for TCIC. I'm saying that essentially we're doing a SUP here, so why can't we basically say that the TCIC needs to park in these 40 spaces first, and then if there's any spillover, no restrictions to the other businesses, the Roto-Rooter, Deja Vu, they could park in those spaces if they'd like. Right. But I mean, this is something that would help the businesses at least feel that there's something in place that is not impeding on their business.
Right. And I think that's why the parking management plan was developed, and we indicated that families and the elderly would park in the spaces immediately across the drive aisle from Tri-City, that then they would go to the available spaces in Zone 5 along the northern fence line, and then, if they had to, those spaces were taken, then they had no alternative but to go way to the far northwest corner. So I think the parking management plan provides for that, along with the security guard, their own committee task force, their communication in the lobby, their communication out to their own membership. And we wanted to explain this to the other owners and to show that this was a way that this parking could be managed, not to infringe on anybody else or designate spaces, but that in compliance they would make every effort to park in those specified areas. So there's a lot of steps that have been taken to both develop this and to have this implemented, and Tri-City is committed to adhering to this plan.
No, and I understand. I think it's a great plan. I have no criticism of the plan, but any good plan, what's important about it is not only how it's implemented, but how it's actually executed down the road. I'm hearing that there was an MUP in April. By July, we had problems. So ways to avoid that. I belong to a church president. Yep. We have parking issues. We have multiple tenants in our facility, and we have similar issues. And
sure.
I tell you what, church members, especially some of our elderly, they want to park wherever they please. And
yep.
So management may communicate, may expect members to behave a certain way, but sometimes it's out of their control. So I feel that designating, or at least somehow coding parking spaces, whether it's an orange space or a purple space, whatever, so that they know, okay, those are our spaces that we're supposed to be parking in. And if they're not available, they understand, okay, then we can go over to the spaces next to that, or to the north end, or wherever.
Right.
Mr. Aguilar,
you don't have people that, I don't know. At my church, we don't always have people that show up every week.
Right.
Some people only show up at certain times of the year, and those people may not communicate with the church as often and may forget about those.
So, Commissioner, I completely understand. I've worked at two churches for over 13 years before coming here to CCI, so I completely understand the parking issue. It's an issue across the board at churches or religious organizations because people like to go. I think if we designated spaces in any way, shape, or form, we would have additional opposition from the other owners as designating spaces. There is one, Melissa Kurbis in the center has marked off 18 or 19 spaces specifically for the Love Boutique, and that's been going on. We would love to do the same thing, but that is not part of the CC&Rs. I hear your suggestion about color coding things. We could certainly do some color code on a car, but maybe not on the spaces. And I think this is just part of the owners accepting Tri-Center and Tri-City and becoming good neighbors to one another. And the other thing is, I think there was no parking management plan in place when Tri-City took over their occupancy of the site. And they also, as I mentioned, there was a misunderstanding. They thought that they were allowed to have 100 people at any time, and it finally was clarified that no, that only meant during the Friday prayer service. So I think that some of these things have contributed to some of the opposition, but I think the parking management plan, if it can be adhered to, will solve a lot of problems and show that they are making every effort to be a good neighbor and not park in front of other businesses, not crowd the parking areas at all.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
All right. Does that conclude your questions, Commissioner Aguilar?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. My questions have been asked and answered previously, so we will now open the public hearing, and we will allow 10 minutes for the public to email comments to planning comments at city.com. Somebody's mic's open. Or voicemail at 760-643-2816. And I currently have 7:05. We will reconvene at 7:15. summarize or read into the record comments received during the break?
Certainly, Chairman Rossler. Just give me a second here as I'm gathering the comments that we received. All right. So we've received 3 comments during the break, but we also have several letters or emails that we've received prior that were asked to be read into the record. So I'll be doing that. But first I'll start with the comments that we received during the break, and then I'll move on to the other comments, if that's okay with you.
Yes, proceed.
Okay. So the first comment that we've just received during the break is from Jim Holcomb, who's representing Roto-Rooter Plumbers and Restoration. And his email reads, John Conley, what about the 12 parking spaces in front of Roto-Rooter that have been added? Hello, Planning Commission. The consultant is very biased. The parking plan is very biased, and the video of the parking is very biased. The center has never had a parking problem before the mosque moved in. It tells you a lot. The mosque had to hire a second security guard to control parking, and a massive amount of people coming in and out of the mosque with their previous minor use permit. 100 people at a time is a joke. They lie, they lie, they lie. Deja Vu, the gym, Indian Joe's, and West Coast Flooring all operate in 9 hours normally, and especially during Ramadan. In addition, the building on the west side, just bought by Joe Deutsch, is applying for an occupancy of 300 people with parking of well over 100 cars, and other business in the center want to expand as well. Both churches, Indian Joe's, the gym on the east side of the project in Can's building on the entrance drive to the east of my Roto-Rooter building. The owners and managers of the mosque do not have an open door policy and do not get along with other neighbors. The mosque has repeatedly broken all their required use permit requirements and has had at least 225 people at one time in their mosque. They will not adhere to any rules and have never stuck to their plan of 100 people. That was confirmed in a video and physical count by Deja Vu next to them. They never have complied with the 100 people before. How can you make sure they would now? The mosque is going to drive other people out of business and cause uncontrolled chaos and parking, along with entrance and exit issues. This is not safe. They have never turned away anyone from their services, and it causes mass chaos for others trying to enter and exit the space. Please deny the mosque's request for their SUP. Signed, Jin Holcomb. The second comment that we've received is from Jim Holcomb asking for this to be read to the Planning Commission. The video conference is completely one-sided. John Conley and his staff have been forced into going along with the mosque because they are afraid of legal repercussions. His presentation, along with the consultants for the mosque dominating the entire 45 minutes without rebuttal from our opposition attorney, is vastly unfair. Signed, Jim Holcomb. The third comment we received is from Melissa Kurbis. It reads, I own the Love Boutique, which is in Zone 5. How is this going to be policed? They have never adhered to their use permit since they opened. Planning has already stated that they don't have the manpower for code enforcement. Their security guard that they stated they had never left the front of the building even after the last owners meeting. Signed, Melissa Kurbis. I've just came to my knowledge that we've received additional comments, Chairman Rossler, so I'll be reading those right now.
Sure.
The comment is from Brian McCann, and it reads, he's a representative of Roto-Rooter. It reads, as the president of Roto-Rooter at 2141 Industrial Court, I have had to manage employee frustrations over an inability to come back and park at their place of business following a lunch break on Fridays since TCIC initially opened. Someone asked if the use may be granted without taking away from the rights of other owners' occupants. The simple answer is no, it can't. Parking is a finite resource, and while it is reciprocal, you can't grant 1/3 of the parking to an owner representing 1/10 of the ownership without taking that parking from others. Problems started almost immediately after the original CUP was granted. The complexity of the parking plan that has been presented should illustrate the problem that TCIC is attempting to overcome. It is a big one. The idea that attendees will check WhatsApp on their phone to find a parking spot is laughable. To work, a parking plan needs to be straightforward. This plan is not, and if approved, will be moving forward at the expense of the 9 other business owners in the center. Thank you for your time and consideration. Signed, Brian McKent. The next comment comes from Justine Nielsen, representing a partner at Procopio Law Firm. This is an email. It says, email 2 of 2, please read at hearing after email 1 below. It starts, on behalf of Roto-Rooter Company Incorporated and other members of the Sycamore Business Center, we submit the following supplemental comments in response to the applicant's presentation and commission questions. Thank you, commissioners, for your time. We also want to commend TCIC for the public and charitable contributions they outlined in their presentation. Our concern, however, remains solely on TCIC's proposed expansion of use, the significant impacts it exacerbates at the Sycamore Business Center. The applicants focus in their presentation on parking availability across the entire 11-acre site is misleading. The real problem is the location of parking. The parking management plan contains requirements of dubious effectiveness which are largely unenforceable. How is the city going to enforce the PMP? Are these requirements even going to be effective? Is there an identifiable way to gauge the effectiveness of a requirement to use WhatsApp or the effectiveness of encouraging attendees to carpool? What if PMP isn't effective? The remaining powers are left with no recourse. The enforcement issue is particularly concerning given the applicant's history of ignoring conditions of approval and violating the code. These issues of enforcement and effectiveness underscore the reason why CEQA review with feasible, effective, and enforceable mitigation measure is not only necessary but required. A proposed expansion of use which triggers significant parking impacts must be thoroughly analyzed, disclosed, and mitigated in accordance with CEQA. Regarding Commissioner Kramer's questions about the interference with other owners' parking rights, staff is correct that there is a reciprocal easement agreement governing the site, which provides for non-exclusive parking rights for all tenants. However, the easement also provides that no single tenant can overburden the easement, which the SUP enables TCIC to do. Signed, Justine Nielsen, a partner at Procopio. And on the back, Justine Nielsen has at the back of the email to please read aloud at the hearing. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Justine Nielsen, Land Use Partner at Procopio, speaking on behalf of Roto-Rooter Company, Inc., and other concerned business owners in the Sycamore Business Center regarding the applicant's protocol to significantly expand its current operations. As a preliminary matter, a few hours ago, we found out the applicant is proposing significant modifications to its parking. Parking is one of, if not the most, contentious issues arising of the proposed expansion of use. We have not had the opportunity to fully review this new information and therefore request that this hearing be continued to allow us to review and evaluate changes which could materially impact our property. Secondly, as outlined in our letter, city staff reliance on the existing facilities exemption is inappropriate under CEQA. The rationale in the staff report for use of the exemption is that the proposal involves modifications to the applicant's use and would not change the existing physical conditions of the site is a misapplication of CEQA. First, it is well established in CEQA law that expansions of use need not include physical changes to the trigger environmental review. Expansions of use, whether physical or not, can create potentially significant impacts for which review and mitigation is necessary. Second, the existing facilities exemption is only applicable if the project proposes a negligible expansion of use. Doubling and in some cases increasing the capacity fivefold is hardly a negligible expansion of use. Therefore, additional CEQA review is required prior to consideration of the SUP. Finally, regarding the proposed expansion of use, the proposal significantly expands the current use in some instances, allowing up to 5 times the current capacity in an already burdened business center. Not only will this exacerbate parking deficiencies, but it will also result in incessant coming and going traffic, creating gridlock and chaos within the center's drive aisles and parking areas. The proposed use is incompatible with the existing uses, would be detrimental to adjacent owners, and would create an inconvenience due to unusual volume and character of traffic. Therefore, the proposed findings for the SUP cannot be made. For all of these reasons, we urge you to deny the SUP, or at a minimum, require the appropriate environmental review under CEQA prior to further consideration of the project. Signed, Justine Nielsen, partner at Procopio. The next comment that I actually have, the series of letters and comments that we received were not received during the public comment period. However, they have been asked to be read out loud during the meeting. So the first one that I have here is from Mr. Brian McCann that was submitted on May 5th. Starts, my name is Brian McCann. I am the president and co-CEO of Roto-Rooter, located 2 buildings down from the Tri-City Islamic Center. The Sycamore Business Center was never designed to accommodate churches. When churches primarily met in late evenings or on Sundays, it worked with minimal business interruption, and neighbors got along despite a use that was not in line with the original construction of the center. That is not how things have worked since the Islamic Center moved in. The only way that the Commission can physically grant a grossly disproportionate amount of parking to any one building owner or tenant in the center is to take that parking from the others. Our right as owners and occupants of the other buildings seem to mean nothing because of an intimidation to protect the religious freedoms of another. Please hear me when I say emphatically, religious freedom is a beautiful thing and one of the best attributes of our country. This isn't about that or any particular religion. This is about a real, physical limitation of parking in the center and a single owner occupant feeling like they have a right to consume virtually all of that parking resource for themselves. Roto-Rooter and the Islamic Center's buildings are nearly identical in size. A rational person might assume that we are due similar parking allotments. If you go back to the original zoning of the center, our office has had about double the parking allotment of the building that the Islamic Center has moved into. Either way, we use at most 14 spaces for our employees, which is about at the maximum for how the center was designed. Unfortunately, under the current conditional use permit, our employees dare not to leave the office for lunch on a Friday because if they do, they will not come back to a place to park their car at their place of business. We have attempted to protect employees' parking with cones, which is a massive nuisance that we shouldn't have to do. But even then, those efforts are not respected. The cones are moved, and all parking remotely near our building is consumed. The center was designed primarily as warehouses with minimal office space, and the parking requirement for the development aligned with that use. Churches are the opposite type of use. They are highly intense consumers of parking and really belong on a property designed with that use in mind. The Tri-City Islamic Center's parking requirements don't come even remotely close to aligning with the type of construction in place at the Sycamore Business Center. Please restrict the current conditional use permit to protect the rights of all owners, occupants of the center, and do not entertain the notion of a new owner-tenant being allowed to move in and consume the existing parking resource of everyone else. Thank you sincerely for your consideration. Signed, Brian McKinn. The next letter or email that I have here is from Mr. Jim Holcomb, addressed to Mr. Conley. Hi, John. Hope you had a good weekend. Thank you for sending me what you could do to answer my questions. Firstly, how do you assure our voices through emails, etc., are being heard? Our objections should be at least read publicly during the meeting, since we cannot communicate so others listening know our points are made. Does the mosque have fire sprinklers? If not, that is directly threatening at least the 2 buildings attached to it, not to mention others. Unfortunately, your answers do not address the issues I bring up. Although there is a maximum of 100 occupants at one time, how do you realistically explain the 470 plus total allowable occupants on Fridays all coming and going? It will be unattainable, as we have all explained on multiple times, and how can it ever be policed? John, there is no workable parking plan. The mosque's request simply does not fit into the business center's layout without drastically affecting the other businesses that have been there for years. You are contradicting yourself on the reciprocal parking, giving one business 70 allowable spaces when the average is 28 is not reciprocal. It goes against our CCNRs and almost impossible to police. The mosque has a parking attendant that stood around and drank coffee, not directing one car the entire 90 minutes we had video running. In my opinion, your report is twisting and incorrectly interpreting the center's CCNRs to fit what is needed for approving a plan that will not work, at least for the other 10 owners of the center. You are insulting anyone who reads your report by assuming there will be 3 people in every car. I watched personally as single man after single man park and enter the mosque. There is also a video of all the parking violations and people entering the mosque to look at. Many other churches have 3 in a car for Sunday service, but the mosque is a completely different setup and cannot be compared to other church organizations. Lastly, I am demanding an environmental study be done on behalf of all the owners in the center. The mosque is proposing, and the city is about to approve, up to quadruple the amount of cars, traffic congestion, and foot traffic than the center has ever had. That is dangerous and unacceptable. Signed, Jim Holcomb. The next one is an email from George Jackson to Jim Holcomb. Hello, Jim. As you know, my vote on SUP is no. Signed, George Jackson. The next one is from Ben Kurbis. Please note that I oppose item PH1 P19-0403 Tri-City Islamic Center. Signed, Ben Kurbis. Next one is from Melissa Kurbis, and it's a letter addressed to the Planning Commission. Regarding the Planning Commission meeting regarding application of special use permit for TCIC 2136 Industrial Court. Deja Vu Love Boutique at 2130 Industrial Court has been open and a member of the Chamber of Commerce for 14 and a half years. We have been involved in various community projects, donating to nonprofit organizations every year. We are sponsors at the Moonlight Amphitheater. We give classes twice a year on sexual health and wellness at Cal State San Marcos. We are family-oriented and employ 22 people. I will not be able to attend this meeting. However, Robert and Ben Kurbis will be present. Shortly after Mr. Tahiti closed escrow at 2136 Industrial Court, they started interior construction with no permit from the building department. They proceeded to fill up our dumpster with construction debris. We spoke to them about this at the time. They then had a service on February 22, 2019, with no minor use permit and were given a violation. The very next day, February 23, 2019, they had their service and filled up our dumpster with all their leftover food debris. When confronted about this, they lied and said it wasn't theirs. We have cameras in our back alley, so it was apparent that it was theirs. The reason I mention this is to point out that their actions show they have no regard for laws, rules, or the CCNRs in this complex. We've met with planning and several people from the mosque to discuss their use permit before it got approved. We discussed parking issues, and at that time, I brought up the Saturday school, but was largely ignored. They told us at the meeting that they would be the best neighbors we have ever had. Sadly, that has not been true. Once they receive their MUP, they have had many more than 100 people on Fridays. As I am sure you are aware, they have been given citations for these issues. They have also proceeded to have Saturday school. When they have classes all day long on Saturdays, it impacts the traffic in our center. Cars are dropping kids off. People are standing in the middle of the easement that goes through the center. Last year, at the end of Ramadan, the center was full. There was no available parking for anyone trying to conduct their business. It went on until 10 p.m. Our customers couldn't find any parking spots at all. My husband came down here that evening and spoke to Mr. Tahini, who was running around the parking lot trying to find open parking spots. This kind of activity severely impacts our business. For this reason, I am totally against the mosque increasing their hours and participants. Recently, we had an owners' meeting in the center, and it was conveyed to the mosque that we were all against the 250 that their new application was asking for. At that point, we were told by their imam he would have several services on Fridays at 100 people per service and have each person drive their own car. This statement was made before many owners. TCIC has consistently violated their use permit and did not get permits to remodel the interior. When the parking study was done, the new gym had not opened its doors. I believe this parking study is invalid, as the parking has increased several-fold. This center was not designed for the type of business activity the mosque has in mind. This center has been severely impacted by the actions of TCIC. Many businesses here have suffered and will continue to suffer if the Planning Commission allows them to change their use permit in any way. There are businesses now who cannot lease out their office space or sell their building because of the situation. Having 2 churches in the center now is enough, as the traffic can get busy at times. Adding a third one that wants to have 100 daily is unattainable. They have stated on their website, TricityIslamicCenter.org, in quotes, "We were able to secure a 14,000 square foot building that can function as a full-time masjid, weekend school, and provide a sizable space for other community activities." End quote. I am requesting for the sake of our center to deny any approval beyond their original membership. Thank you for taking the time to read this letter. Signed, Melissa Kurbis. And the last letter that I have is from Justine Nielsen. Please read aloud at the hearing. And I believe, if you allow me just a second, Chairman Rosler, I believe it may be the same that I read earlier from Justine Nielsen. If I can just do a quick comparison here, just take me a second here for a second. Yes, it appears to be the same exact letter that I read earlier from Ms. Justine Nielsen from Procopio Law Firm. So this concludes all of the comments that we received during the break and prior to that. Thank you.
Very good. Upon hearing that, I will close the public hearing and open it up for commissioner discussion. Commissioner Kramer, any comments?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Hastings, comments?
Yes, I have a question. I guess this would be addressed to the planning staff. The CEQA requirements that were mentioned, was that investigated, and is there some response that needs to be made to that by the city?
Yes, Commissioner Hastings, the CEQA issue is something that the staff further looked into, particularly after the letter from Procopio today. We're relying on the existing facilities exemption under CEQA, which is Section 15301 of the guidelines. This exemption is permitted in situations where there are alterations to an existing private structure that involve a negligible or no expansion of the existing use. The determination that there is a negligible expansion of their use is based on the staff's review of the existing conditions on the project site and the potential for the proposed expanded activities that the mosque is requesting to generate new or increased environmental impacts. The project would generate an average of 9 average daily trips per 1,000 square feet per the Sandag traffic generation rate table, which equates to 100 average daily trips for the project, assuming the 11,135 square foot building. The Sandag trip rate further assumes 5% of the average daily traffic, or 5 trips in the AM peak, and 8% of the project's ADT, or 8 trips in the PM peak. The city's threshold for preparation of a traffic impact study is 50 peak hour trips, so based on that level of trips that the project would generate, there was no requirement for a traffic impact study based on our traffic impact guidelines, and therefore the project is not anticipated to result in a traffic impact based on the volume of traffic that they're generating. Thibodeau Road is the main street serving the center where the project's located. The current traffic volume on Thibodeau Road has been documented to be somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 ADT. This is classified as a 2-lane collector, which has a capacity of 15,000 ADT per the circulation element of the general plan. And so at less than 9,000 ADT, the roadway would operate at LOS-A, which is the current level of service. The city's traffic engineer was also consulted and provided plans for the project review to comment on any potential traffic impacts associated with the proposed project, and he did not identify any public safety, traffic safety, or access concerns related to the proposal. Based on this information, staff determined that the project's expanded use would be negligible and traffic impacts are not anticipated. Similarly, the greenhouse gases are not anticipated to exceed significance thresholds based on the negligible traffic impact of the project and the project's normal operational emissions. Therefore, staff believes that the CEQA exemption 15301 would be appropriate. That's my response. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you for that, I think. Tracking on all the numbers is a little hard.
Yeah.
But I'm still thinking about how I feel about this. I don't know, is this where we have our general discussion, or are we asking questions, or what right now?
This is general discussion.
Okay. So I have to say I have, this is very helpful. I have sympathy for both sides, I suppose, of this issue. I can see where the comings and goings of a religious service tend to be more socially interactive than the kind of parking and movement of people is in a more commercial area. So I get that about the concerns that the other residents of the center have. So I guess I'm just laying that out there for now. I'm still chewing over it a little bit. So that's all I have for now.
Very good. Commissioner Grimm, any comments?
A couple comments and then maybe a suggestion. I would agree with Commissioner Hastings that, on one hand here you have a very difficult time for religious institutions to find places, where they can, buildings where they can worship because of the cost of land and the cost of leases. On the other hand, you have a lot of on a narrow margin that if somebody's parked in front of their shop, that customer just may go right on by. So there's, very strong arguments on both sides. I think Commissioner Aguilar laid out how I feel about the parking management plan early. I think that the mosque has every intention to enforce that. However, it's been my experience over time that churches, because of changes in personnel, different people coming and going, and changing churches and stuff, that over time that eagerness to enforce the management agreement kind of wanes, and so I guess my suggestion would be that the other businesses that are there are allowed by right under the zoning. In this particular case, when you have the special permit, they have to prove, the mosque has to prove compatibility with the existing site, the existing businesses. And I think, again, with my concern that with time, enforcement of the management plan is going to wane, I think a way to solve that might be to add a condition which would require the parking management program and the adherence to it to come back to Planning Commission on a yearly basis, at least for a specific period of time, maybe 2-3 years, with the idea that if it's not complied with and it's not used, then the Commission has the ability to drastically reduce the scope of their operation. And so that would be, I think, what I would be leaning for is maybe approving it, but with something, with a condition on it has a lot of bite to it, making the mosque very aware that if they don't perform, there will be consequences. Anyway, that's a suggestion, and we can see how it goes with the rest of the Commission.
Very good. Commissioner Garrison, any comments?
Yes. It seems to me that we have three options here. One is to delay the decision based on the new parking management plan. Number two, we can reject the plan. Or three, we can approve it with strong conditions. And strong conditions such as ensuring that they have the second guard, ensuring that they turn away over 100, ensuring that they don't have special events, maybe ensuring that they have a covered golf cart to pick people up at the west end, because when inclement weather hits, it's going to be a problem, but rainy weather is not going to cause people to not want to go to those other businesses. So we can't have rainy weather create an even further parking problem. And also maybe having in the statement of conditions no other special events to prevent them from expanding beyond what the scope is. And finally, maybe having the city conduct a written feedback from the tenant 3 months and determining whether they're in compliance. So those are my thoughts.
Very good. Commissioner Looney, any comments?
Yes, I do. A couple of comments. The first, it was written in the report, or stated, that on average 3 people per car would be coming. That seems somewhat optimistic. I think in our culture and where we live, we drive, and how we live, the 1.5 people per car is probably a little bit more realistic. And then, as was just mentioned, I think if we do maybe a temporary approval or a conditional approval to see how this plan may work, I think that's essential. But I would probably want to see some along a 3-month view time rather than a business. An adjacent business can go out of business in a year. So I think it needs to be reported on a much shorter time frame to see if it's going to work. So those are my 3 comments.
A question on your comment there on the 3 months, and with Commissioner Garrison. Would this be just a staff review of how parking is working, or do we want to study? Would we want it to come back to the Commission?
I think the church needs to, or the church and or the city should hire a private consulting firm to see that the guidelines are being adhered to that are set forth in the conditional use permit.
And that would be immediate and continuing for a period of time?
Yes.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
Commissioner Aguilar, any comments?
So the way I kind of view this, I've heard a lot of good ideas here tonight, but the way I kind of view this is there's been problems with the parking. It started, I guess, in July of last year. And it seems like the workaround that they're trying to come up with is just modify their conditions so that they're not violating the conditions anymore. But that doesn't really erase the parking issue, and it may not even be an actual parking issue. People just don't like to walk. People like to pull up right to the business and walk 10 feet in the business. I understand that. When I was on council, we used to get that about downtown and all that. Nobody wants to park 100 yards away and have to walk. So I get that. So again, it's a perceived issue. However, the reason we're having this meeting is because TCIC was not following the rules. Maybe their members misunderstood. I get that. But we're looking at a year later. So what I would like to see is either use the existing rules that are in place right now for them to continue to worship and revisit this after Ramadan next year. And if all the rules are followed, then we can consider expanding their parking. I just think we're getting back at this issue too quickly. And again, I think we're just changing the rules to make it so they're not breaking the rules again. And I just don't agree with that. And I do feel for the organization because, especially here in California, finding places to worship is not only expensive, but not easy because, some businesses and people in our state are not as accepting for religious worshiping, no matter what that religion might be even. So, again, I feel for them, but I think we got to look at the businesses that are existing there, and I think we're going to have some businesses that are struggling after this COVID-19 thing finally comes to an end, and our businesses are going to need a leg up and need every advantage they can get. But I think most importantly, I think that we need to make sure that the group can actually follow the rules, and I'm totally open to taking a look at this after Ramadan next year.
Would you want that to come back to the Planning Commission as a report, or a review of the special use permit in a public hearing?
Well, I think it needs to come back to us as the Planning Commission, and I think we need to review that, as a report. I think it needs to be fair for both sides.
All right. Very good. For me personally, I found it's not a matter of the amount of parking, but the location. I think the maximum number of spaces on Friday afternoon was 47% of the space being occupied. So it's more of a location than it is the amount of parking. I think that the parking management plan, I'm willing to give that a chance to go, but I think I agree with the other commissioners that it needs to have a very short leash. And I like the idea of a 3-month review of the parking management plan and then a revisit in a year of the entire use permit. And again, that can be in the form of a report back to the Planning Commission. It doesn't need to be a public hearing. and then we can decide after the report if additional conditions are required, and we can schedule a public hearing on the permit. So that's where I'm at right now.
Chairman, this is John Conley. Could I step in for a second?
Sure.
So with respect to the 90-day review, is that something that the Commission would be comfortable delaying until after the COVID restrictions are lifted, since they won't be able to have any assembly uses until that point?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, if they're not there now, it doesn't make any sense to go check. So after the restrictions are released and they start assembling again for worship, the 3 months will start then.
Okay, and then secondly, on the parking management plan, I just wanted to touch on this issue because it's been brought up by a couple different folks. So the city's parking requirement of 3 people per car is based on the development code standard for churches, which require 1 car per 3 fixed seats. So that's where the parking requirement that the city has of 34 spaces for their 100 occupancy comes from. The parking management plan, however, goes above and beyond that number to provide additional spaces for the mosque's membership. The current recommendation in the PMP is for 100 spaces so that they could accommodate if there were literally 1 person per vehicle, but the staff really believes that that's a lot more parking than they really need. And so if you noticed in the slideshow, I think it was slide number 26 where they had the colored zone shown, and they showed spaces in each of the zones. The green zone, which I'm going to reference the parking management plan, is zone 3, showed 12 spaces. And if you remember, Mr. Holcomb owns the property there in front of that, and he was objecting to allowing 12 spaces in front of that property, and staff believes that's probably a little more parking than they need. So we would be satisfied with just the parking that's recommended in the parking zones that are blue, yellow, and turquoise, which are zones 4, 5, and 1. And that would still accommodate well over 80 spaces for their use.
This is Commissioner Looney. I think with the plan that's been laid out, we kind of put the ball in their court as to, okay, they have the parking spaces, and now are they going to be disciplined to park in those spaces where the other businesses have the parking that are needed? And I think it just gives them, again, that opportunity to show that they're willing to make this work. Because it's going to go one way or the other. And I think it's good to have things in place, and hopefully, things will work out in a positive manner. But Mr. Conley, what happens if things do not go in their favor and the people do not park where they're supposed to park? What steps does the city have then?
So the use permit is a tool that we will use to manage their parking. If the parking continues to be a problem and we continue to receive complaints and code enforcement verifies that they're not meeting the conditions of approval, then it's subject to coming back to the commission for either revisions, additional conditions, or revocation.
Mr. Conley, it's Commissioner Grimm. Just to add on to that, if it does come back to commission, but it doesn't come back as a public hearing, we could not make modifications to the scope of the operation. I guess we would either have to then reschedule another public hearing, or we could make the condition include that it comes back as a public hearing, and I'm not sure, which way is the best in that regard.
If there were violations of the use permit, it would have to come back in a public hearing format.
Right.
Okay. Very good.
This is Commissioner Hastings. I had a question about... Oh, did I step on somebody?
No, go ahead.
Okay. If there's this monitoring that would take place 90 days or so after the resumption of services there, someone had suggested that it would be a consultant that might monitor this. Is that not a use of code enforcement, or does code enforcement only follow up on complaints?
Code enforcement could be used to determine on a random, basis if they were meeting the conditions, but they're not. They couldn't provide the kind of service where they could be out there 3, 4, 5 days a week, every week, monitoring this. So yeah, it would have to be a consultant or someone hired by the applicant to oversee that effort.
Okay.
Or hired by the applicant, but having staff have the authority over them, rather than just have a private consultant representing the church do it.
Yeah, it would have to be an objective,
independent
party review, and we would be able to oversee that to some degree.
Would it be something that the other owners would have input on as to who is hired?
No.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Kramer. Listening to this go back and forth, and I'm kind of following on the same line as Commissioner Aguilera, except for me, there's been code violations, there have been complaints since they've been there, and it feels kind of like with having children and they're bad, you put them on restriction, and okay, now they're good, they're doing their homework, doing all the stuff, and then you stop looking, and it's going to go back. And that's kind of the way I feel about this, because they've been there for over a year, and, it's not getting any better. It's getting worse. So and now if we have it come back to the commission in 90 days, you got all this extra work. So I'm not sure what the real answer is, but for me, it's a no vote any way you look at it, because you had the opportunities and things aren't getting any better. So those are my comments.
Let's say that we did go with a condition that incorporates things that a number of us have brought up. One that I think Mr. Looney indicated should come back 3 months after COVID's over, and then the fact that it would come back to the full commission a year later, and then perhaps every year after that for a while. But and then the condition would also include the fact that we would come back as a public hearing on that yearly basis. And what I'm trying to do is put together the idea of what I think we have as a condition so far. And I think I would be willing to support it with a condition that had that kind of teeth in it.
I tend to agree, and I like Commissioner Garrettson's additional restriction of no special events to be held at the mosque. So, any other comments?
I wanted to go back.
Go ahead, Commissioner Hastings.
Okay. It's sort of part of what Commissioner Kramer was saying, and looking at this in the entire context, is what I also see. Yes, there were violations, and part of what I think I see here is working out the kinks. They took several organizations, combined it, had some big ideas that need to be reduced and refined. So if what's happening. So they applied for a minor use permit that really didn't fit because they hadn't thought all that stuff through, and now maybe there's one that will actually fit better, given the current conditions of their building. Understanding also that probably that building, now this is me projecting, but doesn't fit their largest vision of what they would like to be as an Islamic center. But still, it's enough if they can have conditions that work for them. That's it.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Grimm, would you like to take a shot at formulating an additional condition?
Okay, I'll do my best. Hopefully, John will be writing down as I say something, and maybe can work it out better than I can. But I think the idea that that Commissioner Looney came up with about the 3 months after the COVID, that we get a report at that time, and then after a year it comes back to commission as a public hearing. And I don't know how the commission feels, but maybe we do that a few years in a row to make sure things are going well. And we also include in that condition that the commission would have the ability to reduce the scope of the operation back to where it was before, or in some format, if it's not working. And then finally add Mr. Garrettson's caveat in there too.
How about adding Mr. Conley's restriction of no parking in Zone 3?
That's fine with me.
Okay. Is that
could I suggest we also add a couple of other things, like put it in the statement of approval that they will add the second security guard, that they will add a covered golf cart to pick people up on the west end in inclement weather, so that doesn't interfere with the other businesses, and no special events, and they'll turn away people if it's over 100, they'll turn them away. But put that in the conditions of approval.
I thought the second guard was part of the proposal right now. So it's part of the parking management plan, I believe.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's correct.
So we can put it in there, but I don't think it's necessary because we're going to be adopting the management plan. But I would like to see something in there that says something about the second security person actually being away from the front of the building and maybe operating the cart to bring people back and forth in inclement weather, rather than having two security guards standing in the front, greeting people. Then they become greeters and not security guards. So I think we need some restriction on what that second security guard would be doing. Vis-a-vis a golf cart.
We can clarify in the parking management plan that the second security guard is required to manage parking.
That would be a better place for it.
Yeah.
What about a cart?
Yeah, so I have a summary here of everything I've heard so far. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. One is 90 days after COVID, the staff would report back to the commission on the parking, inclusive of data. Within 1 year of approval, the mosque would come back in a public hearing format, and this would be for the first 3 years. That's a question. PC may reduce the scope of operations if the parking is not being met. Zone 3 would be removed from the parking management plan. There would be a shuttle required for people parking in Zone 1 to the facility. They would have to turn away anyone over 100. there'd be no special events, and specify in the PMP that there are 2 security guards, one for operations and one for parking. That's my list so far.
John,
Sounds good to me.
I'd just make one other note that that 3-month evaluation would be done every 3 months, not just the first 3 months.
Okay, so every 3 months, you'd want us to come back to the commission at the staff level to report on the parking situation there?
I think so, at least for the first year.
Okay.
Because again, going back with a comment Commissioner Kramer had made, there's been a history of violation already, and I think that the year-long evaluation taken at every 3 months will prove their trustworthiness.
Any chance of making that quarterly, every 4 months? It just seems like by the time you turn around and do it once, the other 3 months, or I don't know. It just seems
that's
seems
fine.
pretty.
It should be a 6-month evaluation. I think it needs to be. It could be every quarter. That's fine too.
Okay.
Well, quarterly is every 3 months, right?
Yeah.
But,
I'm sorry. I've been every 4 months. Thanks a lot, Beth.
Already down.
Sorry, Charlie. Yeah, I agree on all those conditions, and I think doing this quarterly for 1 year is plenty, because at that time, if it goes beyond that, then we're micromanaging them to the point of, I don't know, it just seems like they will have certainly approved their desire to be good citizens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, then we're saying, well, you aren't trustworthy people, and I just don't think that's true.
Well, I guess I would argue that you're not allowed there by right, and so there's always got to be a mechanism, and maybe there is already, but there's always got to be a mechanism where if things go to hell, but hell in a handbasket, then somebody has to be able to step in and do something about it. So as long as we have that ability to do it, they could have a total change of personnel in 2 years or 3 years, and like Commissioner Aguilera said earlier, things can wane over time. So I think we always need to have some ability to be able to open it up. Maybe it's not quite as often in the future, but some mechanism to do that.
This is Commissioner Erickson. I would also suggest that we ensure that any evaluation includes a discussion with every tenant that is in there too, so they get the opportunity to provide their feedback, not just an observation in the parking lot.
Yes, I agree.
Right.
All right. Would someone like to make a motion?
Chairman, if I could maybe ask the applicant to respond to the list of conditions to see if they're accepting of those, that'd probably be good.
Okay. Mr. Tahiri?
First of all, thank you. We appreciate your time. I made a list of the conditions. Just want to mention that, of course, the neighbors that are voicing the ones that are the most vocal are two of the neighbors and their customers, especially Love Boutique. Their customers, of course, park in front of our establishment because they don't want to be seen going to that establishment, and we don't complain about that. And we, and they have mentioned some of the things that they use in their letter from their lawyer: overburden, chaos, parking issues, their hyperboles. And you look at three things I really appreciate that to cut through the emotional information that was shared by some of the voicemails and emails. If we look at three things, and I think it puts in perspective. First of all, we have the City of Vista's staff recommendation in support of this. The second one is a third-party independent scientific parking study that shows there is ample parking. Third is our willingness to change our application from 250 to 100, and they have mentioned violations over violations, and there's only been 2 violations that have been rectified, and they have been deleted. If you look at your packet, they have been actually deleted because we made a very good, legitimate case for them. One of the violations was Hands of Peace, which is an amazing organization that encourages interfaith understanding. They came in. We had made every coordination to make sure we were at 100, but last minute, some of the parents who had flown all the way from Israel, they came in, and we wanted to make sure that they were our guests, and we accommodated that. Since then, if you talk to code enforcement, they have been at the facility multiple times, and they have done their head count, and they have seen that we have been in compliance. So no, there have been only 2 issues of violations that they have been, and the second was basically already taken care of because there was a mistake that they shouldn't have been issued in the first time. So there's not multiple violations. And we just wanted to, some of these conditions that are being put, we're a nonprofit organization, for us to hire a consultant to be able to monitor this. It is an enormous expense, and you guys know that. Mr. Aguilar knows, working for a church, and most of you, we basically work on nickel and dime to make these things work, to put that kind of restrictions on us, to hire a consultant. And even if we do that, these 2 neighbors, to be honest with you, they are using the parking as a veiled bias towards us, and whatever they're saying, you can hear it in their hatred and vitriol, but that's okay. Let's put the emotional stuff away. Let's look at the parking study as an objective data. Let's look at the City of Vista staff report as an objective data, and look at our request to reduce our attendance from 250 to 100. Our willingness to change our Sunday school to a Saturday school so we don't impact the parking. The fact that our core need is only for 2.5 hours in the span of a full week. So the rest of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Roto-Rooter's access to parking is ample. In the span of 12 months, we're asking for 30-day accommodation, and it's from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., Commissioners, when most of the businesses are closed. To put these kind of conditions on us is, I think, overkill. And, no matter what, if you roll out the red carpet for Roto-Rooter customers, and we do everything, and same for Deja Vu, these are the only 2 vocal ones. You didn't hear from anybody else. They will still come in and make these allegations, these accusations that are absolutely over the top, and you can see it and you can hear it. But don't listen to my emotional arguments either, please. Look at the data. Look at the parking study, read the staff report, and please reconsider these restrictions, because these are very strong restrictions that you're putting on a nonprofit organization that is working on nickel and dime, and we just can't afford that, Commissioners. Please be considerate of that, and look at the data, look at the facts, and please put all the emotional noise that has been made from really both sides, but the data speaks for itself. So I really I understand where you're coming from. You want to have a win-win situation, but at the same time, this is so overburdening to us as a nonprofit. We might as well just close our shops and basically stop worshiping, and that becomes something that is not good for a city to have that kind of reputation, to be a city that does that regardless of someone's faith. But these restrictions are too much and too expensive for us to be able to do that. But we have made every good faith effort, and they're talking about violations. Look at the violations in your packet. There is just 2, and we're talking a span of 1 year plus. So these things have been made to become hyperbole, and we really ask you to consider the conditions, please, and make sure that you render a judgment that is based on facts, and you have the facts in front of you.
If I could ask a question of the applicant real quick.
Yes, Commissioner Grimm.
Yeah. I understand your emotion, with the answer, but I guess the question was which what part of the conditions can't you live with. The only thing I heard specifically was that it was the cost of the consultant. Is that accurate?
Right. I mean, if we hire a consultant to monitor the parking, and we are more than welcome to make sure that when the code enforcement there, that they can verify the information there, that everyone is in compliance of attendance. But for us to hire a third party to come in and look at our attendance that is on the schedule that you see on the one of the slides that Mr. Conley provided, if we have somebody coming in to look at our over-shoulder, a third party, every time when we pay for their services, we simply cannot afford something like that. That condition needs to be removed from that. And I can tell you, we can, if you want us, we can, every Friday we can, we'll have our security guard. That second security guard in itself is a big expense for us, but we'll go ahead and absorb that expense. We'll make sure that we don't park in that one zone, but to have the consultant, that needs to be removed from the condition because it's just not something that is really fair. But it's something, as I said, no matter what we do, those two neighbors will always be vocal because they will never be satisfied with all. You can put 20 conditions, honestly, they still will come back and complain about something else because it's just the kind of people they are.
Well, but that doesn't matter. We deal with facts. We don't deal with emotions.
Right, exactly, and I appreciate that. And the facts are, you can see, as Mr. Aguilar said, there are some people that they don't want to just walk a few steps to go to the next. There's ample parking, so there are times that I have to park all the way somewhere else to come into TCIC. And that is the fact, and it is not a real issue, as one of you mentioned. It's a perceived issue because the parking data, the fact shows you guys that there's ample parking. Even if we were asking for 250 people, there's parking that is ample, but we're asking for only 100 people. So that makes it even more that there's a lot of parking. Yes, we may not get the parking we want, but it's only, as I said, in the span of a week, we're looking at 2.5 hours. And the span of 12 months, we're looking at 30 days of Ramadan, and the services are at night when most businesses are closed.
Very good. Thank you.
I would still like to hear his answer about whether the only condition he can't live with is the cost of a consultant.
That is correct, yes. And that's something we would like that to not be in the conditions, the commissioners. But the other stuff, we will be more than happy to report in terms of our parking management plan. We want to make sure that we adhere to that. And as I said, no matter what we do, the fact of life is going to be there's two neighbors that will never be happy. We could really, do whatever we can, but that's the fact of life. We're going to live with that. But we will make sure that we stick to our parking management plan. And the parking, as you guys can see, there is so much parking in the center itself that for 100 people, it is going to be insignificant in terms of impact because our usage is limited.
But, again, I like to make this as concise as possible, or precise.
Sure.
That is, you can deal with all the other conditions, but you would like the commission to reconsider that paid consultant. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
If I may, this is Deputy City Attorney Amanda Guide. I'd like to provide some information in terms of the legal framework we're operating in for this particular item. This item is an individualized assessment of a religious land use that is subject to the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, or RLUIPA. RLUIPA prohibits the government from imposing land use regulations in a manner that imposes a substantial burden on the religion unless the city demonstrates that the condition furthers a compelling governmental interest, such as public health and safety. In addition, the restriction must be the least restrictive means of furthering that interest. I mention this because a substantial burden may be found where the government imposes a significant restriction or demand upon the exercise of religion, such as due to substantial expense. So I want to mention this for the commissioners as you're discussing potential conditions, to keep that in mind that this particular land use is within a unique framework in federal law that doesn't apply to a non-religious use that you may be more accustomed to.
So basically, what you're saying, Amanda, is that is that the restriction on the consultant is outside of that regulation.
I would advise removing that condition based on the applicant's response, because they're saying that it would essentially create a substantial expense for them and burden.
You know, with that, that's good advice. With that, I guess might turn to John Conley and just say, how much of a burden, I know you guys are already overworked, but how much of a burden would it be for staff to at least do, you know, some kind of a report or something? Maybe we lessen the time on it a little bit every 6 months, or I don't know. But is staff capable of doing something like that?
The staff can report back at whatever interval the commission would like on, you know, any violations or complaints that we've received. It's very difficult for us to gather data because that requires someone going out and counting parking, so that's not necessarily what we can do. We can certainly ask the applicants to volunteer and provide that data themselves, but the staff won't be able to provide that. We can essentially report back on complaints, violations, any activity that's occurred on the site to keep the commission informed of any problems.
Mr. Conley,
so if somebody called in with a complaint on Wednesday or Friday that there was no parking, the following Friday a staff member maybe could drive through the lot to see if
if that kind of complaint occurred, we'd have code enforcement go out and review the issue the following week.
Mr. Conley, can we, this is Commissioner Garrettson, can we get a list or an email for each of the other tenants and do a free survey monkey every 3 months to find out what their feedback is?
That's possible. I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to get in touch with every business owner and be able to provide their feedback on a quarterly basis, but I can certainly try.
Well, I think if we have their email and we send them out a survey monkey, it's up to them to follow up or not.
Yeah, I can do that.
All right, thanks.
So are we thinking that Tri-City will monitor themselves and report to staff every 3 months on the number of attendees, that their services, and the number of parking spaces used? Is that what we're thinking?
Well, and the staff could certainly add to that, Chairman, with a review of any code enforcement complaints or investigations.
And the survey monkey of the other tenants.
Any other thoughts or comments?
I forgot. Do we have a motion and a second?
We do not. We have an amended condition. Maybe Mr. Conley could read the condition back to us as being proposed right now, and then we can go from there.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The list I have right now is that the use would be reviewed on a quarterly basis for the first year, and a staff report would come back to the Commission for each of those quarterly reviews. There would be a one-year review in a public hearing format for the first 3 years. The Planning Commission would be able to reduce the scope of their operations if parking is problematic. Zone 3 would be removed from the parking management plan. There'd be a shuttle for people that parked in Zone 1, the farthest distance from the facility. They'd be required to turn away anyone over 100. There would be no special events, and 2 security guards, one for operations and one for parking, would be clarified in the parking management plan. And then finally, the added requirement for a survey monkey or survey of the surrounding business owners as part of the quarterly review.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would make that a motion. as read by Mr. Conley.
And that's to approve the project with an additional condition?
Yes.
All right. It's been moved to approve with the additional condition that Mr. Connolly read. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chairman, it's Commissioner Grimm. I would second that as long as the city attorney is comfortable with the final condition.
Ms. Guy?
Thank you. I would like to get the applicant's feedback on the final set of conditions.
Thank you so much. We are fine with the conditions. The only thing I just want to mention that the 2 security guards will be for Friday prayers only. That's an expense that we can certainly afford, and we'll try to project and budget for that. But those will be for our Friday prayers, which is the main pain point for the parking, but that will be only for Fridays.
Mr. Tahiri, this is John Conley. If you could clarify that you will still have 1 security guard on site at all other times, that you'll have services that will also be able to help address parking?
Yes, for the other services, we will certainly accommodate 1 security guard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, are we comfortable with only 2 guards on Friday services?
How does that fit in with the Ramadan piece? Mr.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. For the Ramadan, we will have 2 security guards for the services that start at 7 p.m. and ends at 11 p.m. There will be 2 security guards for those.
Thank you.
With that, I would amend my motion.
Okay. So, Commissioners, it's been moved and seconded to approve the project with the amended conditions as read by Mr. Connolly and agreed to by the applicant. Any other discussion or comments?
May I just mention one more thing, esteemed Commissioners?
Hey, yeah.
We are the only thing I wanted to mention that is all those conditions, we will make sure we abide by them. One of the things I know was mentioned about when the weather conditions are not prime, getting a golf cart and things like that, that's something that is an additional burden and expense on a very limited budget nonprofit organization. If that's something that could be removed, we really appreciate that. The rest of the condition, we will certainly accommodate and comply with those conditions.
Mr. Tahiri, this is John Conley. The condition was going to read that you had to shuttle your membership from Zone 1 to your facility. I don't think we were intending that you had to have a golf cart.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that.
So the applicant's okay with shuttling and not a requirement for a golf cart?
If it's not a requirement, that would be great not to have it there, but we'll certainly make sure that if there are certain zones that are far away from us, that we'll certainly figure out an accommodation. But to put it as a condition, it does create a financial burden to us.
All right.
For clarification, Chairman, it would only be for the parking in Zone 1.
Right. All right. Ms. Chow, will you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Chairman Rossler, your vote, please.
Yes.
Vice Chair Kramer?
No.
Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
Commissioner Grimm?
Yes.
Commissioner Garrettson?
Yes.
Commissioner Looney?
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilera?
No.
So motion passes 5-2. Thank you.
Very good. That concludes our public hearing. And the next item on our agenda is reports or comments from commissioners. Any reports or comments from our members?
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes.
We have one item on the capital improvement program that I will blow through.
I'm looking at the wrong agenda. All right, so we move on to our next public hearing.
This is John Conley. This is. Oh, I think that was the applicant jumping off the line.
Okay.
You okay with me?
Go ahead, Mr. Conley.
Okay, thank you. Chairman and Commissioners, this is an action item for the CIP. It's a capital improvement program. We were required to find conformity with projects that are included in the CIP with the general plan. We are on slide number 38, which is the starting slide. The CIP is a plan and associated budget for a 6-year period that covers all the city's public projects. The state law requires that the Planning Commission make a finding of conformity with the general plan and a recommendation to the City Council before adopting the CIP. So on an annual basis, we bring these projects before you. Slide 39, the staff brings new CIP projects before the Commission every year. The current plan covers FY 2021 and 21-22. There are 7 new projects, I believe. 5 are Vista Sewer and 2 are Buena District projects. And I'll just blow through the projects quickly. Slide 40, CIP 8319, security improvements to the Buena Vista Pump Station, which is located at Jefferson Street and SR 78 for a cost of about $350,000. Slide 41, CIP 8320 is fog abatement. That's fat, oils, and grease abatement at the Raceway Pump Station located just west of Melrose Drive, the city's southern boundary with Carlsbad. This is an estimated $75,000 project. Slide 42, CIP 8231, repairs to the emergency overflow basin at the Raceway Pump Station, also located in the same place, just west of Melrose at the city's southern boundary. This cost is estimated at $250,000. CIP, slide 43, CIP 8322, point repair and replacement for numerous Vista pipelines throughout the Vista district. A cost is estimated at $1.5 million. Slide 44, 8323, Hacienda Drive Trunk Sewer Rehab, Phase 3. This project's located just north and south of the 78 between Pomelo Road and Hacienda Drive near the Vista Village interchange, and the cost is estimated at $3.58 million. Slide 45, CIP 8324, fog abatement at the Buena Creek Pump Station located just east of Melrose and Buena Vista Park. That's a $75,000 project. And finally, slide 46, CIP 8322, point repairs on the Buena District pipelines at a cost of $1.5 million. These are the 7 new projects that will be added to the CIP, and staff has found that they conform to the general plan, which is provided in the staff report and the resolution before the Commission, and that completes staff's report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This is a public hearing, is it not?
It is an action item. We usually open it up for public comment. I would imagine a public comment period of 3 minutes would be sufficient.
All right. It is now 8:38. 3 minutes would make it 8:41. We'll reconvene at 8:41. Anyone wishing to comment on the capital improvement program can email comments to planningcomment@cityofvista.com or voicemail at 760-643-2816. We will be back at 8:41.
Commissioner, this is Patsy Chow. This is just a 1-minute warning. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I have 8:41, so we are back in session. Were there any comments received during the public comment period?
Chairman Rossler, we received no comments. Thank you.
All right, very good. Moving on then, any questions from the Commission of Staff on the Capital Improvement Program?
This is Commissioner Garrettson. I have a question on 45. What is fog abatement?
That's fat, oils, and grease. That's basically putting in some equipment that will minimize the maintenance as a result of fat, oils, and grease. Screens it out.
Okay. Fat, oils, and grease. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
If there aren't any other questions...
I'm sorry. I have a question. This is Commissioner Hastings. I just wanted to ask how we assure, from our perspective, that these things are in conformity with the general plan. You can tell I probably haven't read all the sections of the general plan yet. So what is it that we're saying, we're recommending that it is?
We're basically saying that none of these projects are not in conformance with our general plan, and that, you know, they're all envisioned within the framework of the plan. So we generally refer to policies in the general plan that support,
right,
maintaining infrastructure and that kind of thing. There's nothing specific to these projects in the plan other than just policies that support maintaining our infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
If there are no questions, can we hear a motion to approve the CIP?
This is Commissioner Garrettson. I would move that we approve the CIP as presented.
Very good. Is there a second?
Commissioner Aguilera, I'll second it.
All right, Commissioners, it's been moved and seconded to approve the Capital Improvement Program for fiscal year 2020 and 21 and 21-22. Ms. Chow, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Chairman Rossler, your vote, please.
Yes.
Vice Chair Kramer?
Yes.
Commissioner Hastings?
Yes.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes.
Commissioner Garrettson? Commissioner Garrettson? Commissioner Looney?
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilera?
Yes.
Is Commissioner Garrettson on the line? Okay, motion passes 6-0 with Commissioner Garrettson absent.
Very good. Now, reports and comments from the Planning Commission. Hearing none. Comments from Mr. Conley?
Nothing special other than I appreciate your willingness to have a special meeting tonight. I know it meant a lot to the applicant, so thank you for your time. We'll be visiting again tomorrow night.
All right. If there are no other comments, then we stand adjourned until tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.